Welcome back to another Teams recap. I am joined by a very special guest today. I have the General Manager of Office Collab Apps with me, Wright. Lori, thank you for taking the time to come on the show and chat today.
It is great to be here. Thanks for having me.
The first thing, before I dive into the general session, I want to ask you about something I saw on Twitter. And this was a post you had put out there saying that you love when people come up to introduce themselves and meet you at Ignite. But the guest that you posted on Twitter was a little different than most other Ignite attendees. Can you tell us a little bit about who that was and how that visit went?
It was definitely probably my most unusual visitor of the week. So I'm staying at the Hyatt and sitting poolside. And I'm there, and I'm from Florida, so some of my family's over and visiting, and we're sitting around the table, and all of a sudden, out of the bushes pops up this head, and it's this adorable little raccoon who just looks around, and we're like, wait, we're like sitting here in a hotel, like where is this thing coming from? And so he pops himself right up onto the table and like helps himself to food, and it was definitely something I did not expect, but it's always great to meet everybody at Ignite.
No kidding. I don't think anyone would have expected that. Orlando's kind of funny that way. You've got a whole bunch of everything built up in one spot, and then a lot of little pockets of lakes and trees and nature around it, and so you just never know what you're going to run into there.
That's right. Yep, he was fresh out of the swamp behind the hotel.
Well, better him than an alligator or something like that. But yeah. Okay, let's jump into the general session, and this was something that I was really kicking myself for. I got to be a community reporter this last time, which was a really fun thing as an MVP. But the whole first day we were chained to the production crew and couldn't make it to the keynote or the general sessions or any of that. So I got to do all the catching up after the fact, which was fine because everything was live streamed this year and then available on playback. Super cool. But let's talk a little bit. You interviewed the Mark Meadows, the vice president and CTO over at Eli Lilly.
Yep, Mike.
Or Mike. Yep, there we go. And then that was a really good interview. What I was kind of curious about as you guys talked through their journey and how they're beginning to use Microsoft Teams, do you have any specific examples you can give outside of that, other maybe enterprise customers, some name brands people have heard of that are also really good success stories you've heard as of late in the Microsoft Teams space?
Sure. And so Eli Lilly is a great example, and they're using it to using Teams to collaborate with both their lab back to their corporate offices. But we have so many other customers. We announced at Ignite that we have 60 customers and more, actually growing every day, who have more than 10,000 monthly active users using Teams today, which we're thrilled with. Yeah, it's just amazing growth. We also talked about it. Teams is the fastest growing business app in the history of Microsoft. So the stories are fantastic. Some of my favorites, one I talked about at Enterprise Connect last year was a Pacific Northwest chain here, and I can see them out my window every day, so it's a good reminder. But it's Red Lion Hotels, and they wanted to grow from 50 hotels, and they grew to over 1,100 hotels in about a 1.5 year period of time. And they used Teams as the way through this like hyper scale growth period for everyone to stay on the same page, to communicate, to collaborate together. And it was just a core part of their success story. And then, so many other examples, whether it's Marriott Hotels who are using Teams for people who work for Marriott who haven't been to a particular hotel. They can get advice and insight and understand different properties, or companies like Schneider Electric who are using it at a very big scale as well. And, examples are just how they run their quarterly business reviews through their financial planning and analysis groups. So many different types of use cases for so many different types of companies, and it's just phenomenal to see every single day.
Yeah, with the example of Redline, that hyperscale almost seems like not a good enough word for that kind of growth. That's a lot of growth, and it's exciting to see Teams at the center of all that. It's those kind of stories, they really help instill confidence and see that it's not just being used and tried out there, but there are some very big names and big growth scenarios centered around Microsoft Teams.
That's right.
Really exciting. Well, let's jump over to meetings. Meetings was kind of a favorite area for me, but there was some really cool announcements at Ignite centered around meetings and features and capabilities. Before we get into the features themselves, I have got to ask about that stroke of genius from the marketing team on the BBC clip for background blur. Can you tell us a little bit of that backstory?
I can. When we first started trying to think about the ways to convey what Blur was all about, the thing that many of us kept landing on was, that moment that happened on BBC, like that wouldn't have happened. And, some people are disappointed because for most of the free world, like we loved that moment, getting to see it. But like when you are in that situation, when you're the professor sitting there, and that happens, it's less than ideal. And so, we talked to BBC and we talked to the professor and said, hey, like we would love to be able to use this for a great way to illustrate what Blur is all about. And so they were generous enough to let us do that. And we put together some great clips that utilized that moment and showed the power of Blur.
It was perfect. I think it was extremely well, multiple sessions, and it just never ceased to get a good response from the crowd. And so cool of the professor to be a good sport about it. It was a lot of fun to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the moment where everyone's seen it and everyone gets it in that moment of like how that happens in everyone's like daily business world.
Yeah, everybody immediately clicks, and it just, so on that front, I know I've heard plenty of fun stories myself. I've probably got a few, but I'm curious if you would be willing to share with us any of your own stories or examples that you might have experienced along those lines. Maybe it couldn't be quite the BBC level, but I'm interested in your adventures in meetings at home.
Well, it's interesting you ask that because I think about like there's been several, right? I mean, I could go through this whole list of them. And a lot of times it's just the fear and the paranoia of that moment where you're like, how do you set up the perfect environment? How do you clean up the background? How do you get everyone out of the house? How do you avoid the overlooker at the airport? Like all of these real world scenarios that you're just like trying to wrestle with. How do you solve for? Those happen, but I will tell you a story that I was doing a broadcast TV interview one morning, and it was an East Coast channel, and I had to be in the office at 5 a.m. or something. And I get into the building, and the power's not on yet, and my access card doesn't turn on the power. So I can't do it in my office because it's dark. So I'm running around trying to find light, trying to find somewhere. And I end up doing this, like, on the floor. I will never forget the spot, like, sitting on the floor. You can see, like, everything elevated behind me. And I'm, like, hoping no one notices that I am, like, literally sitting on the ground doing this interview. And I could have just blurred all of that out. But it's, like, it's those moments that everyone has.
Yeah. Like you said, everybody has had a similar moment. And it just is always fun to hear that it's not just you. Everybody has those moments. So, perfect. And this was just one of many features that were, meeting centric announced at Ignite around Microsoft Teams. Let's see. Let's jump over a little bit. I want to switch gears to mobile. So mobile, there were a lot of announcements that came out as well. We had some things centered around devices with what was announced to Enterprise Connect being the mobile phone station, and is now been introduced by Plantronics and Polycom as the Elara 60 series. Putting the devices aside, there were new features coming from the Staff Hub side of the house with regards to home and shifts. There were things in healthcare. We'll get into a little bit of that stuff later, but mobile was a big focus from what I saw. Can you shed some light on whether you feel that mobile is going to continue to be a growing piece of Microsoft's strategy as they develop Microsoft Teams and other tools within the Microsoft 365 stack?
Unquestionably. I mean, when we look at all of the numbers around mobile growth, mobile usage, like it is clear that mobile is here to stay. It is a primary form factor in which a lot of people start their day and they work throughout the day. And so we're being very mobile centric in everything that we do, not just recognizing that for the knowledge workers, the Alara is a great doc that lets you come in, use your mobile phone, set it up, get all the, Teams functionality right there. And that's really for the knowledge worker, information worker. But we're also looking at what about people who don't have offices and don't have PCs, these first line workers. Most people in the developed world today do have a mobile phone of some sort. And so how do we bring those advantages to them in the same way that we would a knowledge worker and information worker? And so that was one of our big announcements at Ignite this year, was that we were going to take and develop what we call first line functionality in Teams and allow people, whether they're factory workers or retail clerks or baggage handlers, how do we help them with schedule management, with receiving notifications, that need to be sent from their manager? How do we help them clock in, take breaks, do all the things that, are important to their day, and doing that with a mobile first approach? And so mobile is absolutely something that we're very, very focused on and will continue to be.
Yeah, it's and beyond the Microsoft stack. People are just like you said, in the developed world, everybody pretty much has a mobile device. The use is increasing, sometimes at a scary rate, right? But it is definitely a part of the world we live in and work in every day. I really like seeing the home and shifts stuff demoed during the general session. The ability to go in and find a shift that you want and to swap that out with another worker and just submit that and see where that request is at in the process mobily is phenomenal. I mean, that really takes a huge load off of, supervisors and first line shift managers, et cetera. So really cool stuff to see there. Let's shift over to the healthcare side of that. There were some really cool things demonstrated within Teams for the healthcare sector. Can you tell us a little bit about what was demonstrated on stage and where you see that going in terms of the Patients tab?
Yes. Industries or verticals, if you think about it, are something that since the very beginning of Teams that we've tried to take a vertically oriented lens, recognizing that all teams do not work in the same way. They need, different sets of capabilities. They have different scenarios in which they work. Education for a long time has been a very important sector for us, and Teams is doing really, really well in education. But in healthcare, and this is something near and dear to my heart, throughout my career, I've worked on various different healthcare projects with the notion of being able to make healthcare just a little bit better, make it a little bit easier for providers and patients to get what they need and go about their day. And so it was such a pleasure to get to show this at Ignite this year, where with Microsoft Teams now, we have a patient care coordination solution. And what you can do with this is you can safely and securely communicate with your healthcare provider. The provider, whether it's your doctor, whomever is giving you care, can take photos of what's happening with you, and they can annotate that image, and they can send that off and get, recommendations, have someone else take a look. You can communicate back and forth, and you can do this in a very secure way. When this happens today, for the most part, a lot of it is happening over chat apps, consumer chat apps that do not have the security and privacy needs built into it, and it's violating HIPAA and a whole bunch of other regulations, but it's happening. And so now with Teams, it's a way for this, message for these images to get sent back and forth. It's a way for priority messaging to happen, so you can make sure if your doctor is sent a notice that, hey, there's something that's pretty important that needs to be dealt with, it will continue to ping that doctor until that message gets recognized. This is just the beginning of what we're doing in healthcare, and you're going to see a lot more from us continuing in this space.
That's great. And like you said, it's great to have people that are impassioned about a particular area take charge on that. The and I'm going to draw a blank here, but the individual that stood up and presented these features on stage, it was something that, like you mentioned, near and dear to her heart, and she had a very personal connection to it, a touching story of why this mattered to her. And she was able to demonstrate some of these cool things, the priority messaging, seeing your phone continue to nag you about an important message you've been ignoring.
Right.
And then the image annotations, taking a picture of a bruise and sending that to the doctor for triage, and powerful things there. These are great features, but they can even go beyond healthcare as well. It was just exciting to see it put in that context, and then to see the patients. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and we've set up an entire team. So the person that spoke at Ignite, her name is Kathy Menace, and she is one of a group of people that spend their days, like this is the area that they focus on. It is something that is so important to them. It's personal, and it gets their dedicated focus, and we continue to evolve along this line. And one of the most exciting things were, I was talking with the person who runs our healthcare efforts for teams overall yesterday, and she was telling me about the overwhelming outreach that she had from healthcare providers after seeing that, and how much interest and anticipation there is, because this can, really help in a meaningful way.
That's really exciting to hear, and it's neat to see Microsoft Teams going in the direction of not just building a standard product that can be used for the 80% and then leaving the verticals to figure out the 20%, right? Building these unique applications and unique pieces into EDU and healthcare and first-line workers. Really cool stuff to see it just the way that it's personally penetrating these different areas. Cool mobile story coming out. Lots of fun features to see there. Let me ask you something that's a bit more along the lines of your personal preferences with Teams, and I'm ignoring the rest of the Microsoft 365 stack because I'm a Microsoft Teams guy, so that's where my questions will be. But what are you, with the recent announcements and in the recent weeks, what are some of the features from Microsoft Teams that you've been most excited about, that you started to use maybe more than you thought you might as you start to evolve the way you work with your teams internally?
Yeah, it's a little bit like pick your favorite child. So, but I will tell you some of the new stuff that I do really love and think it's game changing. One is what we call meeting recording, and meeting recording is, it sounds very simple, but it's actually incredibly elegant in what it's doing. And it's basically using artificial intelligence to take a meeting like this one, where we are recording it, process, send all the data to the cloud, unlock the content, process it, and allow that meeting to be fully transcribed and time-coded so that you can go back at any point and search for keywords, jump to a specific moment in time. It has facial detection capabilities, and so it can see when speakers are changing and go to that moment in time when a new speaker came in to start talking. Just so much done through the power of artificial intelligence in meeting recording. So that's certainly one of my new favorites. Again, another AI feature is chat translation. I work with people all over the world. Sometimes we don't speak the same languages. I'm getting ready to go on a trip to Paris here soon. We're working through, and some of the stuff that comes back in French, and, my high school French is pretty rusty. So, I just a click of a button and I can translate those messages, and, things like this are just, they really do change productivity and collaboration in the workplace. And my very, very favorite, is something that, we use a lot here at Microsoft, and it's called Who. And Who, you do a / command, and you can find the expert that you need on any topic, whether who knows about something, where is this conference room, how do I, go do this. Who is like a wealth of information that I can use to better understand the question in the moment when I'm asking it and get a quick answer.
And I haven't personally used Who yet, but it's one that I haven't put a lot of thought to. And as you tell me this, I'm thinking about how large Microsoft is as an organization, and how many people there are that you work with in some way that you might not know well or remember the area they're in. how useful that tool must be for making sure you have all the right context you need before going into a meeting or finding that person on the fly that you need. That sounds like I need to explore that a bit more.
Yeah.
The cloud recording, wholeheartedly, our teams internally at CDW, we do a lot of internal meetings or trainings, et cetera, and if we can't make it, we're beginning to use that a lot to where we just have the recording posted to the channel for playback later on, and we catch up as we're able to, and it's a great tool. Perfect. Thanks for sharing your insights on what those are. Safe travels as you head to Paris soon, and I really appreciate you coming on today. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again before too much time escapes us. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Josh. Great to see you.